Hello and welcome to Conscious Conversations with One Breath Institute with your hosts Lisa McNett and Debbie Schirmann. Tune in for mind-blowing conversations on how to be more conscious and present in your life.
Topics we cover include healing, spirituality, introspective breathwork, astrology, dreams, alternate states of consciousness, and so much more. Hear from us and our interesting guests. Make sure to follow and subscribe to easily find us and listen again.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Conscious Conversations with One Breath Institute. Today, I'm so excited that we have my old dear friend, Keli Carpenter, with us. Keli, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's our pleasure and our honor. So I'm going to share with you Keli's bio so that we can, start out with that. Keli is no stranger to mind, body, and spirit awareness. She first started practicing Transcendent Meditation at the age of 6 when her mother took her to learn Transcendental Meditation. And she was recertified at the age of 25. Keli is now a Chopra Center certified Transcendent Meditation instructor, conscious relationship, uncoupling, and parenting coach, and conscious connected breathwork facilitator, mentor, and trainer. Keli is the founder of The Other Side of Average, Therapy for the Soul, and Transformational Coach. Her goal is to help conscious families and practitioners learn and master the 3 most essential tools that help align you with your soul's purpose: your essential nature and the truest expression of yourself, all whilst healing and transcending past resentments, trauma, and stories that have kept you stuck and in pain. It is then that you experience the miracles and fulfillment of life in every moment, especially during life's inevitable obstacles. Keli's philosophy is not to become your guru or healer, but rather to inspire change, share essential strategies, and hold the space for you to bring light to your darkness and help you to reclaim the power you already have. It is all there within you. You just need space held for you as you learn the proven tools and embody the practices needed for awakening to become realized. And I just want to say that I have experienced Keli's safe space holding. And, Keli is somebody who helped me to heal and integrate some really deep childhood traumatic experiences, traumas. And it's changed my life. They've changed my life. So I'm forever in gratitude to you, Keli.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lisa. It's really my pleasure.
So today we'd like to dive into meditation. I mean, I just would like to go back to that you're 6. Do you have a recollection of experiencing meditation when you were 6, when your mom brought you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, often I premise with my mom wasn't some guru. That's not why I practiced meditation. My mom was actually really struggling. She was struggling with her own mental health, going through a messy, manipulative divorce. Basically, my mom was a spiritual seeker, but she also really struggled. And she went to learn in order for her, to support her own self, and took me along as well. So I just meditated because I was told to meditate, not because I was asking big life questions or was aware of or cognitively aware of the things that I needed to work on or transcend or, heal through. I was just told to meditate. So I have absolute recollection of the practice that at that young, and the impact that it had. I mean, like many things, we don't realize the impact it had on us until much later, whether that's traumas or really incredibly beautiful practices like that. We see the impact or really become aware of that later. And, I remember some things as a teenager that would repeat that I didn't realize wasn't normal, in this awareness that I had, but I didn't really understand it until much later in my life.
Okay. So is there anything more that you'd be willing to say about that?
Yeah, for sure. So as a teenager, there was this phrase I always used to say. And to also, frame this a little bit, I was an only child till I was 14. So right when I was coming into being a teenager, I had a mom who was, now pregnant and having her first baby, which anyone who's a parent knows that that's a really big time. And then because of my mom's struggles through her life with mental health, that was even more challenging. So I was a teenager just wanting to be a teenager. And all of a sudden I was a babysitter and I'd always parented my mom anyway. So there was lots of stuff going on in the house to manage and hold. And that felt challenging. But I had this phrase that I always it just would, come up after witnessing myself in some struggle or some suffering. And it was like, oh, I can only hear myself think for so long and I need to make a change. And what I was aware of was that there might have been events outside of me that sure had an impact, but actually the cause of my suffering was my own inability to integrate it, my own inability to meet it and shift the meaning I was given it. And I've had this awareness that my suffering came from inside. I work and mentor under Gabor Mate, and I love one of his quotes that he uses, and it's trauma isn't something that happens to you; it's something that happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. And I had that awareness as a teenager, that it wasn't really so much about what was happening on the outside. It was about this restriction and constriction that I couldn't get past or integrate because I didn't have the support or the tools. And so when I was 19, I went to a counselor on my own accord because I knew I wasn't my story. I had this ability to be connected through the use of meditation to the part of me that was bigger than the story. But it didn't mean I knew how to integrate it or to work with it or had support with it. So I went to a counselor on my own accord when I was 19. And in that session going in, like the traditional therapeutic model is, we are our story. We're the worst things that ever happened to us, and we are the worst thing we've ever done. But I knew I wasn't that. But when I went in, she couldn't see that I wasn't my story. And I was like, oh, like, what? You're supposed to be somebody who's going to help me. And so I actually went for a second appointment and I was like, okay, this is definitely not for me. And it was really at a very young age that set me on a path of how do we integrate our stories? How do we evolve beyond our stories? How do we become free from those situations that seem to define us or lock us into certain experiences in life?
Thank you so much for sharing all of that because I imagine a lot of people, and myself included, the first time I saw your bio and I heard from you that you started meditating for the first time at 6, there might be this image that, oh, she started meditating at 6, so her life just must have been like great and perfect
Mm-hmm.
and just very present and introspective the whole time. And so that's not necessarily true, everybody. But what I'm really hearing is that you got a jump start so that when you were a teenager and you were having these, I will call them traumas, just to give
Yeah.
them that label, and you did use that word. You were having these traumas, these experiences. You were able to come back to this self-reflective place and to seek out seek out help, which, at 19, seeking out a therapist on your own, that's very mature, right? A lot of people a lot of teenagers might go to drinking or drugs or just not have that awareness to to take um, to take that step back, that self-reflection, and to take action. And so I just really want to, yeah, just to highlight that and to acknowledge you for
Mm.
taking that path.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we're talking about meditation, and you also mentioned, that we aren't our stories. We aren't our stories. And
Mhm.
you also mentioned that piece about integrating the negative emotional experiences that we've had. So whichever direction you'd like to go with that, I'd love to just hear more.
Okay. Well, what comes to mind initially is I work on, a combination. I really did a lot of reflection. In I didn't come into this world with this idea of, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. I knew from a really young age I was here to break cycles. I was to be the change. And I only became a teacher or started really, working in that capacity after really diving into this work on such a personal level. And I did a lot of reflection on, based on my life, what I have accomplished, and not in a monetary sense, but even meeting childbirth and having pain-free you know, childbirthing experiences, and navigating, as I did as a child, these traumas and events that happened. What really, like, was it just that I meditated at 6? Was it that asking these questions? And it's really looking at what I call 3 conscious practices. And the first one is inquiry, actually learning some radical inquiry to help us reframe the narrative and the meaning that we've attached to certain situations. Embodied feeling, we all have to learn how to feel again. This is how I use the breath, whether it's breath work or breath in a different capacity, but being able to be in our bodies and build that, develop that skill of feeling. Because when you look at people's lives, how many of us were, it was actually safe to feel, or how many of us had people around us whose their emotions weren't safe. So most of us, suffering is 100% of the time a disconnect from ourself or the essence of who we are, and an avoidance of pain and vulnerability. Most of us have been taught to run from things that seem vulnerable or painful. And so, that's a skill that we actually have to learn how to do again in a safe way, to hold these deep emotions, integrate them, process them. And the other is stillness or presence. And so, dropping in from that place of meditation, of silent, connecting to that silence within us that is bigger than our story. To me, that deep place of presence and stillness is really just about developing the witness, so that we can witness what is, instead of what we want to see, or what we, have been conditioned to see, or, any number of things. So I really believe in the 3 tools are essential for that full integration, that real conscious healing and support. Because for most of us, what happens, the traumas and experiences that created that restriction, the conditioning, the shutdown in any capacity, happened in a relational container. So it heals in a relational container. And, oftentimes I say, I just get to see people until they see themselves. And, it's until we can really see that and develop that witness and that ability to create that container, we truly do need support. We do need to be held in it. If we could have done it on our own, we would have already. So, the conscious support, and they use the word conscious very consciously because not all support is equal when you look at my story. And then from there, it's those 3 practices that I feel are essential for that full integration and liberation from our suffering.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give an opportunity for Debbie's voice. Debbie, do you have any questions?
They have not formulated yet. So at this time, no. I'm really enjoying your grounding presence, Keli, and how you are articulating. So I would like to hear more of just whatever you have to, whatever more you have to say. I know, and I just noticed like an energetic shift in myself. There are questions coming, and if there's more to say, or Lisa, if you have some questions more, I would love to just continue being a witness at this time.
Great. So Lisa, do you have questions, or you just wanted me to maybe talk a bit?
No, that's okay. I wanted to give Debbie the opportunity to jump in if she had something burning. But, I would like, because we oftentimes get asked what meditation is.
Mm.
So if we could just introduce that concept of what is meditation from your perspective, that would be great.
Great. Yeah. So I talk about meditation there's really just 3 types of meditation. There's focused, observant, and transcendent. So focused meditation is where we're focused on one thing for the entire time. That could be we're focused on an audio. We're focused on visualization. We're focused on a candle. Even breath, focused on the breath in a particular pattern, in a particular rhythm. Observant is where we're observing what is as it is. So that could be mindfulness practices fall into that, a walking meditation. It even could be, when we're talking in reference to the breath, it could be just observing the breath without manipulation, just the awareness of it. And then transcendent is the use of a mantra. It's a Sanskrit. It doesn't have a meaning. It's just used for its vibrational qualities. And it's also used simply as a tool. So if we were to think about the way that the mind works, we say something, we associate it with the next thing, and pretty soon, there's this talk about the monkey mind. We don't even know how we got onto this thought way over here. If we actually have awareness, we can follow it back. And it's like, oh yeah, I got there because of here, and so because we have given so much emphasis and so much rein to the mind, it uses us instead of us using it. So in a transcendent practice, it's really using the mind in just the right way to go beyond the mind and tap into that silent space that exists within all of us to really, and there's this little teeny fraction of a space for most people. They don't even know that there's any space there between the thoughts. But when we drop into the practice, we start creating space between the thoughts, which is the access to the soul, to the essence of who we are, our true self, whatever terminology you want to call it. But that's where we find the thinker of the thoughts, the part that can witness, like I did as a teenager, being able to witness that I wasn't these things, that I wasn't the thoughts, I wasn't the experiences. And so one of the differences about, and I use all practices, I've used all practices. I really believe in, just from my own experience of transcendent meditation, and transcendent meditation, that would be TM, PSM, Vedic mantra meditation. They would all fall into that category of transcendent meditation. They all have that Vedic, sound. That's not an English word. And how I would, describe transcendent meditation, to me, it's the most integrative of mind, body, soul. That deep place of awareness. And with focused and observant, is we start with the practice and we end with the practice. So if we start focused on our breath, we're end focused on our breath. If we start a walking meditation, we end with that walking mindfulness meditation. With transcendent, part of the word is not only the transcendental consciousness, but we start with the practice, but we transcend the practice. So we start focused on the mantra, but we transcend that. So that's about the 3 categories. And one of the things I say, really about meditation is we don't meditate for the experience in meditation. We meditate for the other 23 hours of our day, where we're experiencing more flow, where we have more intuition, we're responding more than we're reacting, where we're just bringing in more awareness. So it's less about the experience. In my courses and my teachings, there's a quote of mine that I always say, and I always it's like pretty much over an 8-week course, I'm saying it every single class and even threatening to test them on it. But we can't avoid that which we seek when we implement the practice. So the things that we really desire in life, if we're more aligned to that true essence of who we are, our soul, that deep calling, we're going to naturally move in that direction. So we can't avoid what we truly desire, not what we want most, but what we really want, if we're implementing the practice. So the actual miracle is in the ability to implement it, the discipline, the ritual, the habit that we create to practice.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. So how does somebody do that? Right? Like, how does somebody do that? That really is the key, and that is the hardest part, right? And we hear it all the time ourselves.
Mhm.
I can't just sit down and meditate, and so I do. Oftentimes, I encourage people, take a moving meditation. Just
Mhm.
be present with the feeling of your feet on the ground as you're walking, and the way the air smells, and the way that just be present in the shower. And that's oftentimes my entryway for people, but of course your work is very different. And so what would you say to somebody for how to get them to implement that discipline?
Yeah, and it's a really great question, and it's actually why part of that whole inquiry process I was speaking to you a little bit ago about, how and why have I been able to meet life and all of its challenges in the capacity I have to integrate. And I used to do breath work over here and do, therapy and letting go and, um, forgiveness work over here and meditation over here. And I would find that in teaching meditation, there, uh, that there's always what I consider actually a quite large percentage of the people who don't meditate. They learn it. They know that they want it. It's like their soul knows it's the path to, finding more presence, but they don't implement it. And that was part of how I, shifted all of the work that I do to really being about the 3 conscious practices. Because I kind of talk about the reasons people don't meditate. It's either that they think that their mind is too busy, oh, my monkey mind, I can't sit still. I hear that all the time. I don't have time to practice, my day is too full. And there's that old quote, if you don't have time to meditate for an hour, you actually need to meditate for 2. It's that they believe it's religious. in some capacity. And really, it's just actually, if we're dropping into that deepest place within, whatever faith that is going to expand. So it's, it's expands whatever is within. The other was really why I combined everything and extended the amount of time that I work with people, is because of the ways in which we've lived our life, we are defined by our story. And that part of us that's defined by the story and the conditioning and the wounds, we live our life through that. And, there's that analogy of the mind, 10%, in reference to an iceberg, 10% on the surface, 90% under. So I talk a lot about bringing the unconscious conscious. So yes, if there's 10% conscious and 90% unconscious, those unconscious patterns and wounds and attachments and conditionings are going to direct our life. And that part of us, we can even call it our ego, is rooted in that belief in separation, in the wound. And so it will draw us into habits and behaviors and situations that are away from what we want most and more about what we want in the moment. And so when we work on bringing the unconscious conscious, that actually starts changing. So we become conscious choice makers. If there's not 90% under and only 10% above, we become conscious choice makers. There's it's kind of a hard one to swallow for most, but our life is our litmus test. Some people, especially on a spiritual path, it's like, this isn't what I want, and yet life keeps happening in this way. And the reality is we get exactly what our unconscious self wants. So it's a hard one to swallow for most, but all we have to do is look at our life and what is happening, and we get a sneak peek into what's happening in our unconscious self. So when we, work with all of those practices, they're not only developing the witness, the stillness, but as we begin to inquire and reframe and work on the story and understand it in a different way and look at beliefs, and we begin to feel, because we can't heal what we aren't willing to feel, we start bringing more of the unconscious conscious. And then that practice, that original question, how do I implement this? We can. If everyone could just drop into a practice of meditation every day, and we were all aligned to our soul, and that deepest calling and sense of self, think of how the world would be. Really, only, in one sense, all we need is meditation, right? But we actually don't, because we have too many years of stress and trauma and conditioning that need to be unraveled in the process.
Yes, and just highlighting that piece, because I really appreciated that you recognized when you were a teenager, I am not my stories. And then you also identify that most people are living from their stories. And it really is that conscious versus unconscious piece. And yes, unfortunately, sometimes in the most spiritual circles, there can be the least amount of actual consciousness with regards to that reflection of, I'm actually creating my life.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that in. Yeah. And you said that you work with people over kind of a period of time, and you bring in, these 3 ways of working with them so that they're learning to drop into that stillness and that connection. They're also reframing their stories and reframing their stories, and then they're also just integrating and healing. So would you share with us a little bit more about what working with you, who do you work with, and how, what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of ways I work one-on-one with people. It's what I call therapy for the soul. They're very process-based. So after 19, 26 or so, I started working deep in process work. It was actually the first place I learned about Tetany. Tetany isn't just a breathwork thing. So Tetany, the shaking, all of that is just in that deep work through the stories and the traumas and what I call process work. And so I work, and I still actually work with a mentor that I've had for, over 25 years. And I kind of lost where I was going to go with that. So yeah, so that particular course was 750 hours in 10 months. So really in depth, incredibly deep. And then I started mentoring in his program. So a lot of what I do is really rooted from that time in my life when I work with people one-on-one. And then of course I have trainings and compassion inquiry and different, stuff that I've done over the years, but really it's rooted from that time in my life. So I work one-on-one with people in that, what I call process work. And it actually brings in all aspects of that full integration within a session. And it's really because of my experience of, when I said, when I get to see people until they can see themselves, is that I absolutely trust the wholeness and the wisdom in everyone's bodies. And I trust the pain. So there's no amount of painful experience that we can't visit without an integration of that experience all at the same time, because of that level of trust that's just inherently who we are. And the wound is where the light enters you, as Rumi would say. There's a deep purpose and beautiful aspect to what we call as dark or shadowy aspects of self. And then I also have a course that I teach that's called Become Unapologetically You. And that's where we really, the foundational piece is the Transcendent Meditation. So people receive their mantra, we meditate together. But every single session for the 8 weeks, we're doing inquiry work. We're working on the feeling, and we take a look at it from just what I call the TASA method, which is my method. And really it's the cause of suffering and the answer to it. And then it's looking at the physiology of stress and trauma, so the physical aspects, and these conscious practices being the antidote to that. We look at the psychology of trauma, all the different types, the symptoms, we look at the psychology of that and these conscious, how and why the conscious practices, help unwind and unravel that. And then we look at the spiritual aspects. So we go through the higher states of consciousness and the qualities of experience of that come with that ability to witness, and which is essentially, they all have a little bit of a different quality of experience, but that's essentially what it is, that witnessing awareness that gets developed through those states of consciousness. And then we take it into the relational. We look at the cycles of relationship. So at first it's all about self, and then we take it into the relational and look at the cycles of relationships and the patterns that we fall into, and how the 3 conscious practices help us step out of that cycle and into conscious relationship, conscious parenting, conscious. And my passion, my absolute passion, I work with teenagers directly who are ready to, who are doing this because they want to, not just because their parents are telling them to, but actually are interested in doing the work. So I do work with teenagers directly, but ultimately everything that I do is for the children. It's the next generations that I really believe in breaking the cycle And there's no bad client, there's no difficult children, it's really just the experiences that they've had. And then as facilitators or practitioners, our ability to really see them and meet the need that is showing up and supporting them with the tools to redefine that, to reframe it, to evolve beyond it. But it's really ultimately the work I do is for the children. And so my passion is really families. I mean, when I get to work, well, we're partners. I have partners that go through the course, or families. Right now I'm working with a family of 5 that's going, the 3 of them are going through the course. And it's miraculous. Just children are amazing in their ability to meet this work, and they need the space held and the support, from parents that are also doing the work, whether we like it or not. As I mentioned, Gabor Mate, working, directly with him, and he says, if you're worried whether you fucked up your children, don't worry, you have. It's just, whether we like it or not, we pass on our conscious and our unconscious stuff to our children. And so, for us, working on bringing that unconscious conscious, and the impact that has on our children, and then being able to support them. So I was a teenager with even just a fraction of the tools and how it helped me navigate being a teenager. And I've raised 3 teenagers with these practices. And I've just seen how impactful it is to step into being an adult with tools to support life, because it doesn't matter whether you've meditated for 45 years, life still happens. And it's really about our ability to meet it.
Yeah. And I was just having images and thoughts come up as you were speaking. And Debbie's a new mom. And so not a new mom, but she has a toddler. And so I'm sure Debbie has some thoughts and questions, but I was just getting this image of the way to the children is through the parents.
Yes.
And, that parent with a young baby who, might be a perceived handful, right? Like might have some postpartum depression, and just, there's this baby crying and trying to communicate its needs. And when they get to that 2-3-year-old, place. And so yeah, that's the image that I'm having of just, that person, if they find you or you find them in that place, it can shift so
Yes.
much about that dynamic.
Imagine a world where mothers were held. If we look at in this way and with these tools and in this safe, sacred container, if we look at developmental trauma and that understanding that even as mothers, or our children regulate their nervous system based off of us. And so, and we weren't meant to be mothers in the capacity that Western society has us being mothers. That idea that it takes a village is really true. It's just that we don't have that village in today's experience of life. And, you can just imagine what world we would live in if mothers were held in this way. Because when you look at generational trauma and the regulation of nervous systems, you work with the mother, you work with generations to come.
Yeah, thank you, Keli, for sharing. And for those listening, this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to meet Keli. So much of my presence today was being witness and getting to know you, and feeling into, your grounding and firm and true love that you have to offer. It feels very pure and limitless. So I just want to speak to that. And generational trauma was really coming through and breaking cycles. And what I really I have heard and experienced so much of what you shared, and I reflect, yes, in agreement of so much of what you shared. And I appreciate your intentional steps and having the knowledge to appease like the mind for when someone's like, well, what about this? And you're like, well, here's this perspective, and then ease it through. But really what I've gathered in your offerings is that you really do help people see that life has choices, that people have choices, and that we can arrive to a place of more choices, no matter how limiting we may feel, or just the labels, right? The labels that we may put upon ourselves unconsciously or even consciously, whether we took it from the condition in which we were brought up in, or we pull it in ourselves and label ourselves, right? We always have more choices. And just by listening to you is really what just gathering your gifts, your offerings of holding space really helps people provide inner solutions, inner choices.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take it any way, because every time we connect to that stillness point that you spoke of, right? That the moments in between the thoughts, and the more we get familiar with it, the more it becomes routine, the more it becomes habitual, the more it becomes so part of us. It's just deeply ingrained in every aspect. The more we can experience life from an observation lens.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not attaching to the story that we're experiencing, but be in reflection. How do I want to shift and change that isn't aligned with my truest essence or soul, or again, using your language, however others want to connect to that, right? The deepening of self, and allow that to be the guide. So coming all back, wow. I'm so happy I met you in this presence. And today, I like knew immediately too when we were taking a couple of breaths before arriving to the official podcast. I was like, "Whoa, here we go! Here is another powerful lighthouse, powerful." There we go. My internet dropped out, but in my imagination, it's a lighthouse or a bonfire flame. Here's another bonfire flame where other people can feel and come around and decide to get closer if they'd like to, or just be in presence. So with my metaphor, I trust that you're receiving that. And I'm really grateful for connecting with you today.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you both for doing what you're doing and for inviting me onto the podcast. Beautiful.
Absolutely, Keli. And just being mindful of your time. So we will be posting below all your details, but you can find Keli at The Other Side of Average. The Other Side of Average. I've always loved that name.
And just to kind of wrap up with that, the reason I called it The Other Side of Average is because I was just so average. I had an average experience of life in the traumas and the situations and the dynamics, and yet approaching them on the other side of average in a different way. And that was that self-reflection, in that journey of more becoming a teacher or a space holder, or is what, how do you meet the normal experiences of life, but again, not get defined by them, which is the average. So I was so average in all the ways, and approaching it on the other side of average.
Perfect. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, that is such a beautiful way to close. And is there anything else that you'd like to leave everyone with? Any final comments or piece of wisdom?
Really pulling off of something that Debbie said is that she said something about solutions or choices, and the answer always exists simultaneously as the challenge or the problem. It's just that we're usually looking through the lens of the problem and not aware of the answer. So the answer lives within, and with those 3 conscious practices, the answer can be brought to that conscious awareness. So the answers you seek are within you.
Yep, they sure are, because we are whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Well, Keli, I have questions now, and I look forward to meeting you again. Hopefully we can have you again on a podcast and have those questions be spoken to at that time.
Wonderful. Yeah, I look forward to it. Mm-hmm. Thank you both so much. Yeah, I really acknowledge you both in the work that you're doing as well.
Well, I will receive that. I just want to give you praise and thanks and acknowledgement, but I will receive your acknowledgement as well, because it means so much to me coming from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's take one conscious breath together and we'll close out.
Yeah.
Perfect.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to this episode all the way to the end. And for that, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
We want to hear from you. Reach out and let us know what you thought of this podcast. And please like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends.